think we can start. If you'd like to do the roll call, Arlene.
Yep, okay, so can I just remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and will be placed on the websites of the Partnership and Dundee City Council for public viewing. So the roll call, Councillor Lynn.
Yeah, present.
Councillor McHugh.
Present.
Annie Buchanan.
Present.
Sam Riddle.
Present.
Vicky Irons.
Yes, I'm here, Ali.
Dave Berry.
Present.
James Cotton. We've had apologies from Diane. Tony Gaskin.
Present.
Raymond Marshall. And Martin Sloan.
Present.
Okay, that concludes the roll call. Item 1 is apologies for absence, which we've already had. Item 2 is declaration of interest. Are there any declarations?
Nope.
No. Item 3 is the minute of the previous meeting and action tracker. The minute of the meeting of the 23rd of November is attached for approval.
Well, we'll just go through this page by page. Front page is just who was there, so I don't think anyone, unless someone's not listed that was there. Page, the second page of the minutes, any comments? Page 3, page 4, page 5. So can that be accepted as an accurate record of the last meeting of the Performance and Audit Committee? Thank you.
3B is the action tracker, which is attached for noting and updating.
Do you know what? I've just remembered something. I'm going to change the agenda around to enable Shona and sorry, hold on a wee minute to get away. It's the, so we're going to take the primary care item, which is item, yeah, sustainability of primary care. We're going to take that first, but I guess, yeah, we could take that after the action tracker would still be one of the preliminary items in the agenda, wouldn't it? So yeah, if we take primary care after this, yeah, action tracker, we're on there.
But yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of briefly talk to that. I mean, we've done the update again in terms of the actions from some of the previous kind of meetings. You'll see there's still a couple of kind of quite old ones that we do need to kind of get cleared off. So we'll kind of get them cleared off for the next Performance and Audit Committee. There are kind of less actions than there have been previously, so I've managed to kind of clear a few off. Excuse me. And there's one or two that have already been kind of resolved within the current agenda today. So kind of happy to take any questions on anything anybody's concerned about.
Dorothy, please. Dorothy McHugh.
Thank you. Dave, thank you for addressing that. What I'd written on my copy of the action tracker was 9 out of 14 are overdue. But I'm glad to hear your assurance that these will be not overdue at the next meeting. Good luck with that.
Thanks, Councillor. I mean, it is a fair point, because I mean, looking at some are going back to 2021, which is when we actually started the action tracker itself. So we need to get these cleared off, because it's not acceptable to want them kind of sitting so long.
Thank you.
I don't think I have any questions. Does anyone else? No. So can we move on to the item on primary care, please? Item, which is number
Item 10.
Item 10. Yep.
Yeah.
Please. Thank you.
So I think Tony Gaskin's going to introduce this one, given it's an internal audit report, and I think Shona and David will come in on any particular points. So thanks.
Right, now this actually, if you're sharp-eyed, you'll realise this wasn't part of the Dundee IJB plan. You get this as a bit of a freebie, and it's quite a big one as it happens. So there you go. Obviously, this is a key risk for Dundee IJB and for the other three clients, all of whom commissioned it. And what we had, as you're probably aware, it took quite a while to get to this point. And that's a reflection of the fact that it was incredibly complex. So we did a lot of field work at the beginning. Initially, one of the first questions to ask was, what is primary care? Because you couldn't tell from the risk. So the risk was all about one particular segment of primary care, in essence, which was the GP contract. And that's always a danger because it kind of overbalances, but we're about outcomes. We're about outcomes for patients, not inputs. And that's quite a common thing. So what we found was that the governance landscape was cluttered, to say the least. And that's a reflection of the way IJBs are set up. We all know that. We all know that you perhaps wouldn't choose to set up things this way, but that's the way they've been done. So that we have this issue of different people having different involvement, NHS Tayside having an involvement. Their clinical governance committee really should be having an overview, or at least they needed a committee with an overview of it. They weren't getting it. It was being led by Angus IJB, but also David Shaw, not in his role as officer of the IJB, but in his other role as an officer of the health board, had involvement. I mean, it's an incredibly cluttered landscape. And what you had was a lot of people doing very good work with an extremely difficult, complex and wide-ranging risk, but it wasn't coherent. And I can take you through the report in detail, but that's the important point. You've got all these people, all with input, all with slightly different approaches, all in terms of their constitution, the way they're setting up, perhaps having the ability to have different approaches, but overall, there are a lot of common issues. They need common solutions. And where we came to, the first big point, I suppose, was that there wasn't this coherence, that not everyone had the same risk, and not anyone had a risk that covered all the relevant areas. So that's the first thing. And then we started to say, well, let's have a look at this in detail. And who owns the risk, and is there clarity about who's doing what, and is there a way of just learning from each other? And there were informal mechanisms, but it wasn't, again, structured in a way that was going to give us the best chance. And we'd looked at by the time the integration schemes were coming out, and there's a whole raft of different strategies involved, and they need to cohere. So it's not that and this is always a tricky area when you're dealing with the relationship between IJBs, between each other, and with the health board. So everyone can do their own thing. It's whether that makes sense or not. Bluntly, it doesn't. What you need to do is try different things. Different organisations have slightly different pressures, but making sure that there's a consistency, that we learn from each other, and we have the same approach to the whole process, and that there is real clarity about how we report those risks and provide assurance on them. And the other key thing to mention is this is a risk that's been sitting around the 25 mark for a long, long time. And there is a point where you have to say, well, technically speaking, I won't go into risk management too much detail, but you can't have a risk at 25 for too long, because 25 is guaranteed doom. So what you do have to do, there are tactical ways to describe it, but that's what you're talking about. So you do have to think about recalibrating as well, and saying, well, we don't want to be here, but we have to accept the reality that let's have something that has meaning, so that we can frame the risk in a way that gives us a chance of achieving realistic objectives. But we can see improvement in management. And there was a whole raft of other things which I won't go into in great detail, but estates is a key issue. It's something, and you see that the reports we do for NHS Tayside, there is a very large estates component to this, and that is not being well resolved. So we've talked about that, and the way that needs to happen, and the way that all parties need to work together. And it's naturally the complexity of the thing that you don't have. In your integration scheme, there's no responsibility for estates at all. but you can't deliver the things you need without estates and indeed without IT and other enablers. So it's an incredibly complex landscape. And the final point I want to make, because it's a big report, I won't spend ages on it, that what we're not saying is that people aren't doing good work, because they are. A lot of people, David and Shona and people across this system have done a lot of really good work. It's about making sure it's coordinated. It's about realistic ambitions. And it's about making sure that one of the key things for you as an audit committee is that you understand the risk environment and you understand whether those risks are being managed to the level that you want. And that might involve accepting things that you don't particularly want to accept, so that you've got realistic targets that can be achieved and you understand what can be achieved. But, you know, there's a lot of good work going on. I think there could be better cohesion. And we've already seen the groups getting together and Gail and David in particular working together to improve things. And you can see that from the responses. So I think in terms of a summary of what's happening, I don't think things were being handled as well as they could have been. There's certainly improvement now. And I think with the best will in the world, no matter how hard David and Gail and everyone else in the system work, you're not going to get that risk down as it's currently constituted, down to a 12 or anything like that. It's going to stay high for a long time because that is the world we're living in. And you as a body and your partner bodies need to have a realistic reflection of what can be achieved, but then make sure that it is being delivered and make sure that you're being assured it's delivered in a meaningful way that allows you to understand what's happening with a massive area of operations and a massive determinant of the health of the people at Dundee. So that's what I'd like to say, and I know David will want to contribute as well.
Yeah, David's hands up. I actually laughed when you said we can't continue with a 25 risk because it's guaranteed doom, but I can assure you that was a nervous laugh rather than finding any humour in what you said. Tony, can bring in David Shaw, please?
Thanks very much.
Yeah, your hand was up, David, and then Shona, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks very much to Tony and the audit team. I think it's been a very useful process. I think part of the job of internal audit is to act as a focus to improve, and I think certainly Tony's given us a lot to reflect on in terms of how we might undertake that improvement. We have been doing an awful lot of work against a very, very difficult to manage problem. We have limitations in what we can do, but those things that we have control over, we should be exerting that control to the maximum of our ability. I think part of the reason why it's a difficult thing to control is because it's so intensely personal to the nature of each IJB. So in Dundee, we are absolutely concerned about what happens in Dundee. Perth are absolutely concerned about what happens in Perth. Angus are absolutely concerned about what happens in Angus. In terms of how primary care is run, you've got a complex system whereby you've got independent contractors, you've got board managed practices, and you've got responsibilities on IJBs and partnerships to do a significant amount of work in primary care in a way that is particular to those partnership areas. So you've got a degree of fuzziness in the way the thing is organised just by its nature. The way that we've tried to overcome that within Tayside is through a collaborative approach, and that means that we keep close to the other partnerships. We try and coordinate with other partnerships. We have our GP sustainability survey that's just gone out this last week, which should allow us to map our risk more closely. And that is now agreed between each partnership as having the same core set of questions. We are working out how we can best use a primary care alliance or primary care board to collate risk in the knowledge that the actions will have to be local by their nature, where it relates to partnership issues. Obviously, where it's a board issue, that can be done centrally, but getting that line between doing things that are particular in a particular way and doing things that are general in a general way and trying to make sure that everyone's coordinated is a complex task. In terms of the risk, we closed 2 practices in Tayside last year. We have had one practice rescind its resignation of contracts just a month ago, and I fully expect to see more practices consider whether or not they wish to continue over the course of the next year. So I think it may not be an existential risk for every practice in Tayside, but for some particular practices, that existential risk remains. We have done a lot of work to try and stabilize. We've identified how changing models of care to use an extended team can help. We have tried to lean our primary care improvement funding into things that will more actively support practices. We have come up with innovative schemes such as the Career Start that manage to maintain practices within their contracts. But it's certainly been a lot of hard work, and we have useful direction from the audit report as to where we can take that next. And I shall stop talking and let Shona come in.
Thank you. And I don't have a huge amount to add. I thought it might be helpful if I just added a little bit about some of the actions that were being progressed. I agree with David, the report's been really helpful, and Tony's team have done a huge amount of work around this, and I think it's given a focus that was needed. I think the primary care improvement plan, which we've all been highly focused on in terms of trying to develop things to support the wider system, has taken up a lot of time and energy, and I think there's other areas that the report highlights that maybe didn't progress in the same way because of the focus on primary care improvement. And I think we've got quite good structures in Dundee that support that, but not necessarily more widely. So it's been really helpful, and there is, as Tony said already, quite a lot that's been happening around this. The primary care board has been reviewed. We're looking at whether we need an alliance model or a board, and there's a lot of discussion around that, what things sit at that Tayside-wide decision level and what absolutely needs to be local to reflect the local differences between the IJBs and the populations we serve. And getting that right is really important, because obviously primary care, particularly general practice, which is what the report is talking about, impacts on everybody. So in the next 2 or 3 years, every one of us is likely to see somebody within our wider general practice team. So getting this right is really crucial, as we know. Sustainability risk, because it had been hosted, we hadn't reflected, I think, enough locally in Dundee, and we are looking at how we improve that. And there's workshops that have been happening on a Tayside-wide basis to absolutely ensure that we're sharing good practice and looking at the Tayside things as much as we can do. The sustainability survey David's talked about, we had one last year, and that's been repeated. The key issue around that sustainability survey from practices is what can we actually do to change that. So assessing that helps us to identify the risk and articulate that, but actually what are the actions we can take? And I know the report refers to some of the work that Perth and Kinross have done about a sustainability team, but in fact they've only been able to recruit to 1 of 4 or 5 positions despite trying for over a year. So but we're sharing that learning, and again, it's how do we try to dovetail that? Is there utility in looking at that on a Tayside level rather than a local level, and would that achieve more? And we are having those discussions. The primary care strategy is referred to, and there's a writers group that has started that are reviewing the current of the previous strategy that Michelle Watts had written, and there's an ambition to have that written within the next 2 or 3 months, and that would come back to the IJB, and we would then look at a local delivery plan, and we've looked at the work that Perth have done around that and started to try and scope some of the things that we need in that. So there's a number of other things that we added into Tony's report to say that we thought it might be useful for the committee to come back in September with a more detailed report, sort of outlining some of these areas and the progress that we've made locally and on a Tayside basis, if the committee were happy to do that. It's probably not useful for me to kind of go through everything individually, but it has been a helpful report, and I think there already is a significant amount happening around this. Thank you.
Ben, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you for pointing that out, Annie. I've kind of forgotten what I was saying now. Just yeah, thanks for that, Shona. And yeah, it's in the recommendations to ask for a further report to come back in September, given the importance of this issue nationally, locally. Something that everyone's concerned about is primary care sustainability. I guess, and so, you know, the pressure's on in Dundee, but I guess the pressure's on even more in some of the smaller towns and villages in Angus and Perth and Kinross, where there's maybe only one GP surgery left, and if that closes, they're faced with a journey of miles. Whereas at least in Dundee, and I hope we don't see any more closures. It's a geographically small area, which I don't know. That's maybe cold comfort. We certainly don't want to see any more closures. But I'll bring in Annie.
Thanks. Tony, in terms of the governance side of things, as the current chair of the Care Governance Committee, yes, it is a very busy committee. I will be the first to admit that. We are more focused on risk these days. We have been discussing the primary care risk and sustainability at the past 4 or 5 Care Governance Committees. We too have asked the question about accountability and where the Primary Care Board will report into. I noticed in the report you suggested it was Care Governance Committee. I am also wondering if the Tayside executives should be aware, and are they aware of the risk, and should they have a bit of an oversight view in terms of all of this work? It's just a suggestion, but we are definitely scrutinising it at Care Governance Committee currently. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm back on that. I mean, a couple of points if I may, Chair. One,
yep.
I don't want to go all John Donne, but no man is an island. If things start to fall in Angus and Perth, it just poisons. That is the nature of it. You get a cascade. If nothing else, it starts to hit some of the acute services you rely on. So all of these things, although Dundee might be a better place in terms of having a critical mass, if you like, which you can't get in a small town, if things start to go wrong elsewhere, it starts to poison the well everywhere. And that's just the nature of these things. And I remember way back, things happening in, say, Forth Valley, and you knew that they would just spread because that's the way these things work. So I wasn't quite sure what you meant about the Tayside executives, Annie, but I mean, in terms of some of the field work for this report was done quite a way back because it's taken a while to come through. There's a real issue about, and it kind of brings out one of the inherent issues with the whole IJB relationship with other IJBs and the partners. And years ago, we did some principles which were circulated and everyone signed up to, which were about how do you find a way to produce once and use often? And it creates a balance because as Dundee IJB, you're only interested in Dundee really. But you don't want officers spending all their time producing different reports for different people. So it's how you do that best. And the truth is, there's no ideal way. The only way you can do it is by everyone sitting around the table and accepting the fact that it's not going to be ideal, but this is the best way to get the information required to everyone focused around risk. And if we have a common view of risk, I think that gives us, and a common approach to how we report risk, that gives us a good way of working at it. But always accepting that you could have a perfect ideal system which would involve David and Shona doing nothing but write reports all day long instead of getting to grips with the problem. And for those of you who've been around the system quite a while, I can remember back in Tayside when things were getting rough, when you had officers who did nothing but report to 15 different committees and would then kind of explaining why they hadn't done anything because they hadn't had the time to, because they were constantly. So it's always that balance between the assurance you need and giving the officers the time. And the truth is, you need a certain level of assurance, but also you need the officers to be out there. And sometimes that involves not getting perfect information, but enough information to be able to understand the risk. And in some ways, with a risk this big, whilst if you're trying to aim for a 9 or a 12, you can get quite nuanced. For this risk, although it's multifaceted, these are big, broad brush issues. So I think there is a way to find reporting that gives everyone confidence that we're managing these things. And there's a phrase we use, and I think I did the presentation a while back on kind of assurance. If we focus on what we would call the key issues, and by that, a key control is one that takes you down from the raw unfiltered state, which in this case is a 25, down to your current score, which is also a 25. But in general speaking, a key control is one that takes it from the raw risk down to where you are now. And a key action, and I think this is what we most need to be focused on, is the one that's going to take from where you are now to where you want to be. And if you focus on those key things and we don't get distracted by the nice to haves, the things that are not key, the things that aren't going to really hit that score, then there is a way of providing assurance to everyone at the right level without having David and Shona absolutely tied up and doing nothing but report. I say that because I don't have to do it, but I think that I can see that there are discussions taking place and ways that that can be done that give you the assurance, and indeed the assurance to all sorts of different groups, including, most importantly, the ones that actually need to support you in doing this. So I'm thinking about making sure that if, for example, there's a commonality across all the IJBs with issues around estates, that gets escalated and dealt with. And if it doesn't get dealt with, then you as an IJB understand that it's not being dealt with and use the powers vested in you to resolve that, whether it be through directions or whatever. So I think that's the level you need to pitch it at. Is the key stuff being done? If not, what's getting in the way? And do you as a body, as a corporate body, need to do something about it? And that's probably the level. And then there's a whole different thing about what NHS Tayside needs. But that can be very common. Yeah. In some ways, what Tayside needs is the composite of the three IJBs and an understanding of how that relates to their kind of slightly different risk. Because in the end, I'm trying to remember the category, but if the health board has to take ownership of a practice, that becomes the health board problem at the moment. So, but all of that is doable as long as we focus on the absolutely key risks and we don't get too hung up about, oh, well, we're Dundee and that's birth, because we all answer an overall system, and if one part of it fails, everyone fails.
Anyone else wish to comment? No. So as I said, the recommendation is primarily that we ask the Chief Officer to provide a further report on progress made in relation to both Tayside-wide and local actions by September of this year. Is that agreed? Thank you.
Okay, that takes us back to item 4, which is Dundee Health and Social Care Partnership Performance Report 2022-23, and it's quarter 2.
I'm going to start this one off. So the purpose of this report is to update the pack on the quarter 2 performance report against the National Health and Wellbeing Indicators and measuring performance under integration indicators. However, for the first time, the published social care demand for care at home services has been summarised and included in this report as well. So the performance report is continually being reviewed and updated based on feedback from PAC members. And work is currently underway to incorporate a technique called statistical process control analysis where possible. And this shows variation in performance over time, which sits out with the normal range, which is called special cause variation. And it's an indication of change in the system. So previous discussions indicated that might be useful. So a change in the system could be either an improvement or a deterioration, either an event such as COVID or an improvement in the system. So it allows you to effectively track change in your data and pinpoint changes where there is a trend in the data. So that is currently underway. So in addition to that, quarterly and locality data for readmissions within 28 days has very recently been provided to the partnership by the NHS Tayside Business Unit, following their work to address coding procedures. So we're currently working with colleagues from the business unit to understand this data more fully, and also our list colleagues as well, So it's anticipated that reporting for this indicator will resume in Q3. So going back to the Q2 national indicators and the key messages from that. We're still seeing significant variation by LCPP, with the poorest performance in many of the most deprived LCPPs. Comparing back to the 15-16 baseline, performance was poorer than the baseline year for rate of emergency admissions for 18+, hospital admissions due to a fall for 18+, emergency admission numbers for 18+, emergency admission as a rate of all A&E attendances for 18+, percentage of care services rated as good, and standard bed days lost to delayed discharges for over 75s. Despite having a deteriorating rate of emergency admissions for 18+, performance is still sitting second best in the family group of 8 comparable partnerships across Scotland, although it's still poorest across Tayside. The rate of bed days has decreased since 15-16, and this is an improvement. It's the best in the family group, although it's still poorest across Tayside. Rate of hospital admissions due to falls is 63% higher than the 15-16 baseline. And rate of bed days lost to standard delayed discharges over 75 is 20.7% higher than the 15-16 baseline, although there has been improvement over the last 4 quarters. Bed days lost to complex Code 9 delayed discharges is 46.9% less, so better than the 15-16 baseline. And again, there has also been improvement over the last 4 quarters. So moving on to the demand for care at home services. So Public Health Scotland has commenced the publication of a 4-week snapshot of the demand for care at home services, which is allowing us to be able to summarise for you in this report. So the information shows the number of people waiting for an assessment for a package of care to allow them to live at home or in the community, and also the number of hours of care that's been assessed but not yet delivered. So this data is a snapshot at the 14th of November 2020. This was the most recent data available at the time of preparing this paper. So what the data is telling us is that nobody waited in hospital and 6 to 8 people waited in the community for a social care assessment. So this is an increase, or was an increase, over the previous 4 weeks from 53 people waiting in the community at the 24th of October 2022. So on the 14th of November, 51 people were assessed and waiting for a care at home package in hospital, which amounted to 872 hours yet to be provided. And 160 people were assessed and waiting for a care at home package in the community, and which amounted to 1,532 hours yet to be provided at the time. This was a decrease over the previous 4 weeks from 58 people in hospital and 194 people in the community at the 24th of October. For those already in receipt of a care at home package, 271 additional hours were required on the 14th of November, but had not yet been provided at that point. And that was a decrease over the previous 4 weeks from 296 hours, which were required and not provided on the 14th of October. So in terms of this, the integration, the IGB recently received a report regarding the management of demand for social care supports. It was in December, and the PAC also received a detailed report on discharge management, including delays associated with social care assessment provision in November 2022. But we intend to continue to monitor this quarterly as part of these the PAC quarterly performance reports.
Thank you. A lot of information there. I'm just thinking there's much talk about the National Care Service will eliminate the postcode lottery, but even at a local level here in Dundee, we have significant variation between the different LCPPs. And for those who maybe don't know, the LCPP is Local Community Planning Partnership, and there's one for each of the 8 wards in Dundee. So significant variation even within Dundee. Dorothy, Councillor McHugh.
No need to be so formal, Ken.
Dorothy,
Quite happy to answer to Dorothy.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions, Lindsay. Maybe you could help me. In the performance report, starting on page 19, I see there are a number of areas where there's no score on the Scotland position, family group, Tayside group. It says not applicable. Can you explain that to me, please? Why is that not applicable? Why are there no scores?
Of course, it's either that the data is not available at family group level or Scotland level, where all the data that's available to us, we are including in the report. Where it's a number we have reported, we haven't compared with the family group or the Scottish position because it would have to be converted to a rate to allow us to do that as well. So where the data is possible to allow us to do it, we have included.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Thank you. I've got another question, which relates to the chart on page 31, number of people waiting for social care assessments. Chart 1. In my graphic, I have a red line, number of people waiting in the community for a social care assessment, but I have no actual corresponding red line in the chart. That's page 31.
Number of hours of care at home yet to be provided.
Number of people, the second one, the key, the number of people waiting in the community for a social care assessment, and it's configured as red. Now there's no red line in my chart. There's blue, yellow, grey and green.
I can't actually find
I have different colours, so I'm struggling to.
Oh right, okay.
For some reason.
No,
Well,
I don't have. There's not red in mine either, Dorothy. You're right.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, Dorothy.
Anyway, you could maybe look at that, Lindsay, and maybe come back to us as to, you know, where that is. My real question, and my important question for me in any case, is how long are the waits within the community for social care packages? And I ask this because of an approach I had from a family yesterday who'd been told this will take several months. So is the timescale of the waits reported anywhere? You referred earlier, Lindsay, to a previous report, and I'm just wondering if I've already had this information. Is the timescale on waits reported anywhere? And if so, where can I see that?
I think I'll pass over to Jenny for that. It's not reported from our team, but Jenny's hands up, is that?
Yeah,
No,
Jenny.
the only thing we're reporting at the moment, Councillor McHugh, is the number of people that wait more than 6 weeks in an interim placement for care. It's a difficult question to answer. It can be a lot more than several months. It depends on the degree of need.
I think Jenny's just frozen. She might want to leave and come back in again. So it looked like she had quite a good connection. But
my computer apparently doesn't like me speaking, and it goes out of internet connection as soon as I open my mouth. Sorry, what I was going to say is we prioritise. So if you're a lower category of need, potentially you'll wait longer than the people that are deemed the most critical. So we measure it as critical, substantial, moderate, low level of need. And then even within the critical, there's 5 layers within that. And there's an ability to respond to an out-and-out crisis. So it really depends on the level of need. We'll prioritise those in the greatest need. Even within that category, we're struggling.
Annie?
So Jenny, I think you've maybe just explained it there, but if somebody's waiting for a long period of time, their risk level or their deterioration is kind of inevitable. So is there a facility, is it up to the families to get back in touch to ask for an urgent reassessment, or how does that work in practice?
It depends on the situation. So some people will be on the caseload of somebody who'll be monitoring and keeping an eye on it. But for people that are I suppose newly coming into the system, they would be asked to keep us up to date with any changes.
Can I ask another question, Ken, please, while we're here? Do we have information on the number of people who choose self-directed support? Because they are then free to go and find their own care package. So is that reported? Do we know that?
We do have SDS information. Yep, and that is something that we do discuss with people. I think they'll struggle to get the availability of care providers because that availability just is, we're even struggling with expensive agency at the moment. So even Scottish Nursing Guild, which is probably the most expensive one, completely non-contract, they're not coming up with availability. It's really difficult at the moment. But for people that are employing their own personal assistants, yep, we do offer that and kind of encourage that as an alternative. And we have stats on it.
I mean, I'm in Fife, it's different, but I used a care agency called Curum and got my own carers, and then basically we went off book, and I, at the end of Mum's life, had 3 carers that gave me 24-hour care at a cost. But it, you know, self-directed support helped. But it would be interesting to know the uptake of that. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope this is the right paper to ask this on, but is there any information about, there was a couple of weeks ago, the Scottish Government freed up money to allow people to wait in care homes rather than in hospital for their care package to become available. Do we have any data on that yet about whatever impact that might have had?
Yes, I've now reported that in about 3 media inquiries and 3 returns. So last week we had 3 people that we were able to
pick up on that.
No, that's okay. We had 3 people picked up interim placements. I mean, we were offering them to everybody anyway, Councillor Lynn, but the difficulty is a lot of people are very wary of taking them, and a lot of the providers, depending on the individual needs, are quite reluctant to take them too. So we've offered out to all the care homes to see if anybody would enter into a block. I think just prior to the Scottish Government announcement, there was 2 in Redwood that we got in place, and we've asked again to see if we can get more. 3 that have gone just in individually negotiated packages. We're using 3 beds in McKinnon, which I think the latest communication from the Scottish Government's agreeing or looking like they're prepared to be more flexible around the use, so we might be able to use that funding for that. We've negotiated a step-down accommodation for people with bariatric needs, because that can be a huge barrier to, you know, being able to find appropriate placements for people who are bigger is really difficult. So, and I think we're looking at 1 complex mental health, 1 in an interim in a hotel. So we are using it inflexibly, and we offer everybody interims. But it's not huge, the uptake.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I think people maybe sometimes think that they think of a care home or a nursing home, they think institution, and really don't want to go there. So I guess there'd be some work to do.
Yeah, our experience when we had respite in a private and voluntary care home was it traumatised a lot of people because they felt that was what the future might look like for them. So I think there are very real and valid reasons why people would be reluctant.
Sure, I agree. Dorothy, are you wanting to come in again, or was you just forget to take your hand down?
No, I did want to come in again.
Go
because,
ahead then, yep.
Going back to my original question, because Jenny said that you were collecting or reporting on people waiting more than 6 weeks. I would just like to know where I can see that information. I understand that there's different levels of need, you know, and different categories, and you prioritise and all the rest of it. So it's complicated. But where can I access information on, or is it reported, or should it be reported to the IJB, waiting times for care in the community?
So we've only just started doing that return for the Scottish Government last Wednesday, and it goes into them every Wednesday. I'm not entirely sure if they're planning to publish that data or if it's just so I'm guessing the only way you could get it is if I gave you it.
So Jenny, I think it's still quite early days in terms of those returns. And as far as I'm aware, in terms of their status, they're there for, I guess, management information in terms of our resilience discussions with Scottish Government. So I'm not entirely sure that they could form part of our formal performance report at this stage. I think maybe over time, it's something that we can certainly provide a level of feedback both to PAC and the IJB.
because obviously there's been a lot of interest today for very valid reasons, but at this stage I don't think we're in a position to be able to publish that and incorporate it as part of the report. I think it is really worthwhile us keeping an eye on, though, what we describe as that unmet need, and we can certainly incorporate that in the future performance reports that come to PAC.
Annie would like to come back in again, I think. Yep.
Yeah, it's different, but it's kind of the same vein. At Care Governance Committee now, we are now getting reports on delayed discharges across mental health and learning disability services, but that's taken a wee while to mature. But that's very it's very interesting and quite distressing because there's so many people need complex care packages. So we get some of that, and that's part of care governance. So that's available as a public document for learning disabilities and mental health.
And we can certainly probably pick that up. We've got another item on the agenda today in terms of the performance indicators across mental health, so we can pick that up there.
Is there anyone else who has a question or a comment on this item? No. Well, we can move on, given that this is for noting. And yeah, Arlene, you're...
Yep, that takes us on to item 5, which is mental health services indicators, and this report is for noting.
Yep. Who would like to speak to this? Dave, maybe it says Chief Finance Officer, unless someone else is delegated.
I think Lindsay and Linda are going to...
Okay, great stuff, thank you.
Great stuff. I'll start the discussion off, and Linda's also here to discuss the sort of more operational aspects of this paper. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval of a proposed suite of indicators summarising performance in delegated mental health services for scrutiny and assurance that will form the basis of future 6 monthly performance reports to the PAC. So the PAC currently receives a quarterly performance report, which we have just discussed, and it was through regular discussions of these indicators that the PAC requested a wider suite of indicators which are also relevant to local priorities and areas for improvement. So the report follows the report submitted to the PAC in November to seek endorsement of a suite of indicators summarising performance in drug and alcohol services. So the proposed suite of indicators shown in Appendix 1 for Dundee is intended to provide assurance and allow for scrutiny of mental health services delivering functions delegated to Dundee IGB. So it's been developed in collaboration with colleagues who lead and manage service delivery for mental health functions. And the suite has also been informed by ongoing work to develop a data set for all community-based mental health services across Tayside to form NHS Tayside clinical care and professional governance requirements and oversight. So as both suites of measurement develop, they're both in the earlier stages, appropriate links will be made, particularly to support the coordinated and efficient method of reporting across the systems. So following approval by the PAC, further work will take place to develop these indicators, and the report is intended to look similar to the style of the discharge management report, which the PAC has been receiving for several years. It will include data. You'll see in Appendix 1 a lot of the data is determined on whether or not we can receive that. This data from the business unit. We don't have, the majority of this data doesn't sit within the performance team within the partnership. So we do, we are reliant on the business unit and NHS Tayside for this. Also a description of improvement activity and a measurement of the impact of this. That's what we're intending on the report looking like. So I'll pass over to Linda to take this further.
Thank you, Lindsay. Committee will be aware then that there are 7 key areas that we think will be of particular interest. So unscheduled care, discharge management, a topic that's just come up, psychological therapies performance, community mental health team performance, psychiatry of old age, learning disability services, and our mental health officer team. And I suspect there will be two things of interest to committee going forward. One is the trend in our own data over time. And the second thing is where we can benchmark that data against performance of either other localities within Tayside or indeed across sort of Scotland. And again, that came up in the previous sort of article that sometimes that data is available and sometimes it isn't. One of the big asks that we've got of the business unit at the moment is that whilst much of the data is made available to us on a Tayside-wide basis, being able to disaggregate some of that and get Dundee-only data is the new and additional ask for them. So we're designing this to ensure that there's good parallels between the data bundle, for example, that you've just seen in the overall indicators and the other report that Lindsay was talking about. So our hope is, from prior knowledge of our mental health areas and the discussions that already happened at committee, that you will agree that the measures taken are an appropriate starting point. I believe these will change over time because there will be particular areas that you're interested in a more in-depth look at, and we should be able to do that. And the other thing that I think will be of particular interest over the next year is as the government introduce mental health service standards, we will need to ensure that our suite of measures mean, just as Tony was saying earlier, that we can report once but have multiple uses for the same data. So I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a very comprehensive list, and I can't think of any omissions. I think it's really important that we have this data, and I know that Pat Kilpatrick, my predecessor as chair on this committee and now chair of the IJB, places a lot of importance on data so that we can analyse performance. But yeah, I think it's very comprehensive, the suite of indicators. Dorothy's first, then Annie.
Yes, I agree with you, Ken. You know, I mean, things might develop over time, but as a starting point, I can't think of anything else I would want included in this report. Three things jumped out at me, you know, in terms of the information that's provided, the East End rate of people with mental health conditions, life expectancy comparisons, and Dundee suicide rate, you know, and it's good that these areas are being brought to our attention, you know, ones to watch for the future. I have a couple of wee questions just on terminology within the table of the suite of indicators. There's talk about support from a navigator. What is a navigator? And what else did I want to? Oh, yes, and there's also percentage of those referred for post-diagnostic support who received a minimum of 12 months of support. Is that standard? Is that a recommendation, 12 months of support? So if somebody could answer those two questions, please. What's a navigator and the standard, the 12-month standard?
I'm happy to take both of those, although Jenny may wish to come in the second of those. So Navigators is our scheme within the emergency department at 9 Wells, a specific scheme that started through Medics Against Violence. So when there are presentations in the emergency department for people who are appear to have been engaged in acts of violence and also have drug and alcohol use issues, we have a specific team in there who link with them at that point in time and then provide follow-up for a short period of time to try and integrate them in the local community into schemes that will help them tackle the root source of the causes that may have led to them being to the emergency department in the first place. So it's on the principle of right person, right place, right time. So we're capitalising on people at the point of greatest need. And the second question, I think, is in relation to within the older people's suite of measures, and that will be to do with people receiving a diagnosis of dementia. There's a national standard that people will receive post-diagnostic support for a 12-month period, so it relates to that.
Thank you.
Yep, Annie.
Linda, it's great to see these. Are you sharing them with your other IJB's colleagues? Sorry, Health and Social Care Partnership colleagues.
It's certainly being discussed, so there seems to be slight differences in the data bundle that is emerging in the 3 areas, but I think we'll endeavour to sort of iron those out as we go in order that what is being shared is as comparable as possible.
Yeah, that would be helpful. This is maybe not the appropriate forum, but I'm quite interested. If somebody completes suicide while they're under our care, and I use the generic our, that's a local adverse event review, is it not?
So there's 2 different streams of suicide review for us in Tayside. So somebody who is actively engaged with mental health services is brought into our adverse event management process, which is a subset of our primary clinical governance group in mental health and learning disabilities. And that is subject to what we describe as a proportionate review. So there are different levels of review that we can undertake dependent on the level of learning, or if we're identifying issues in the care and treatment delivered, we will make that subject to a higher degree of scrutiny than we might do otherwise. For those people who are in our communities but not in contact with mental health services, it's the Tayside Multi-Agency Suicide Review Group who will look at that, which is a different type of lessons learned approach. But we share data across those 2 systems to mean that if there are learning from ours that are applicable at a public health level, that we're making sure we're fully cited on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I don't think there's anyone else, and this is for noting, so thank you for talking us through that. Can we move on to the next item, please?
Item 6, Dundee Health and Social Care Partnership Clinical Care and Professional Governance Assurance Report. This is for noting.
Happy to speak to that, Chair, if that's okay.
Sorry, what page is this on? I don't have the item numbers in the...
43.
43.
Thank you, thank you. No, I still don't have it, I'm sorry. Confused. Sorry, the item number again, please. It's just
Item 6.
Was this sent separately? Oh no, here it is. No, what's the title of this item again, please?
It's the Clinical Care and Professional Governance Assurance Report.
Don't have it. Was this sent separately, I wonder? No.
Page 43.
Yeah, but the pages don't necessarily correlate either. I genuinely don't know where this item is.
Yeah, have you got a printed version, or are you looking on screen?
No, I think I'm getting there now. So if you'd just like to start talking to it, I should get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
Sorry for the delay there.
No, that's okay. So this is the Clinical Care Professional Governance Assurance Report. We suggested that the level of assurance provided from this report would be reasonable and listed the reasons for that in section 2.2. Our risk section again details that our top 5 risks continue to sit within our Dundee Drug and Alcohol Recovery Service. Primarily the risks are related into the challenges that we've got that are ongoing around recruitment and retention, although this is improving in some professional groups and worsening in others. Our nursing service, for example, report that they currently only have 2 vacancies across the service, which is the best position they've been in for quite some time. However, our medical team are struggling with just 1 locum consultant in post at this time, with all of the other posts being vacant or with staff currently on leave. So that is creating quite a lot of pressure within the service in terms of delivering the service, but also in terms of some of the development work that we've got. However, the team are pulling together and we've got various mitigations in place across the service and across Tayside to support service provision. A senior service manager has been appointed. They are due to start next month. So that leadership in and amongst the team, we're hoping will show real benefits, and we're really excited for them to be starting in the next 4 weeks or so. Our clinical and care governance arrangements, I've just listed in section B, and there is an appendix that details a little bit more detail what these look like. But it was just to really make the point that the engagement across clinical care and professional governance within the partnership remains strong through very difficult times for teams. So the standard of the reports that we're getting, the engagement at the meetings that we're getting at the group level, which is the one that David Shaw chairs as clinical director, but also at the forum, which is our education and assurance group. They continue to be well supported, and teams are working hard to make sure that we've got good awareness of the risks, the adverse events coming through, the complaints and everything else, so that we've got a good understanding of what's going on and where the risks are and where the risks might be developing. In terms of our adverse event management, we're relatively static in terms of our top 5, but we do have a governance huddle that reviews these on a weekly basis. So they are looking at changes or particular themes that are coming through, but also the teams where these are present. We have deep dives with the teams, as we've mentioned in previous reports. Slips, trips and falls, just as an example, we've reported that 16% of the people with falls in this reporting period, there are 101 adverse events with falls, had an adverse event with harm. So we did a deep dive into there to assure ourselves that we were managing those as well as we could be. It was never good that people have harm, of course, of any sort. It was good to see that the levels of harm were relatively low in terms of bruising, skin flaps and soreness, but nothing in terms of fractures or escalation that was required to the emergency department or other secondary care wards or departments, for example, orthopaedics. So while people are falling, they're being well managed, and reviews are undertaken after every fall to review the care that was in place prior to the fall and any updates that are required after the fall as well. Medication adverse events at section C7, in a 3-year graph, a line graph there, which is showing an improving picture in terms of the number of medication adverse events that are being reported. And while it's quite variable, month on month sometimes, there is a decline in the numbers that are reported. The January figure is only to the 4th of January, so that clearly will increase. We do review this, and we've got our community nursing team and palliative care teams in particular reviewing this, because this is where a number of these have been identified in the past. And there are no clear themes or patterns that are coming through. Indeed, for this reporting period, there were 18 events reported, and there were 14 separate subcategories reported across 8 different clinical teams. So it's quite variable, but we encourage reflection from the staff members that are involved within that, and any actions that need to be put into place to further manage that. We ask that that is done. Our complaints performance is showing an improving position. The report, the table in section E1 shows that there are 10 open complaints, which compares with 22 from the last report. And there are 4 cases that have been open longer than the 20-day standard, which was compared with 12 in the previous report. So the work that the teams are pulling together with the complaint and feedback teams and our own local complaints team is starting to show improvement in terms of managing those complaints and making sure that we adhere to the 20-day standard more frequently. There's some information there about the different types of complaints that are coming through, and some information on learning from complaints as well. As is the case everywhere, any complaint that we receive is an opportunity for us to review what we're doing and how we're doing it, and to take steps to make sure that we can improve services or review services to ensure that the number of complaints that we get can be reduced. And the final point that I wanted to just mention with the medication-assisted treatment standards, there's a fairly comprehensive report in Appendix 2 on this, but these have been introduced into the Dundee Drug and Alcohol Recovery team, as they have across Scotland recently. We did have standard 1 was red the last time we reported this, but in November that changed from red to amber, so it's showing an improving position. There's still lots of work to do around medication-assisted treatment standards, but there's a commitment to the team to keep working with those. And this is probably something that we'll continue to report through these reports, although maybe not in the depth that we have in the one that we've got today. So I'll pause there, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thanks very much, Matthew. See that, as you said, the top 5 risks still sit with DDARS, Dundee Drug and Alcohol Recovery Service. Like yourself, I'm really enthused by the fact that we have a new senior manager coming into post next month. We've been waiting for that for a wee while. It's really makes quite distressing reading when you look at that sentence. Staff morale remains very low. I hope we can see that change in the coming months and years, because there is a huge challenge in Dundee. But I think being part of a team that helps to address that challenge in a meaningful way can be a hopeful experience rather than one where morale remains low. So I hope we get away from that position. Now, there's a lot of hands here, but luckily they come up in the right order on my screen. So first up is Annie.
Matthew, thank you. That was a very comprehensive and really interesting report. Great to see the very detailed information about MAT standards, so thank you for that. The one thing I wanted to say, it's good to see the lessons learned from complaints. I am wondering, are you considering implementing care opinion as another way of eliciting feedback?
So we do use care opinion. So obviously a number of services within the partnership are NHS Tayside employed staff. So we've been aware of care opinion for some time, and we do receive care opinion notes coming through already. But we've also started a piece of work communicating with care opinion, because I think Perth and Kinross have set up their own care opinion process. So we're currently exploring whether that would be useful within the partnership, so that we can actually have a more comprehensive and detailed report coming from them that would be more pertinent to the partnership. So yes, absolutely, we're exploring building on that.
And also, it's something that one of my colleagues reflected to me the other day. I think perhaps instead of just focusing on complaints, we should change the metric to feedback, because, you know, I think we're very good at focusing on what we're not good at, but sometimes I think we miss what we are good at, and it's nice to see the good stuff we're getting as well as the negative.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make that change to the report. That's a good point, and that should have said feedback. You're quite right.
Okay, now the next contribution is from Martin Sloan.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things I've noted in the report. On big page 56 of the report, there's a number of triple X's being put in the report. It may have been in part of the draft process, hasn't been amended. So just want to highlight that. And also on page 79, towards the top, there is a embedded attachment within the table, which we can't access through the PDF file. So something that needs to be picked up on as well and sorted out for future elements.
What was the second page number, Martin?
Second page is page 79, big page 79.
79.
MAT standard number 9.
Ah, right, yeah. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Martin. I hadn't picked up on that. Yes, we will make sure that any embedded documents are included as part of the appendix in future. Absolutely. And
that's all I had to say.
Yeah, so the X is within there. You're right, actually. I think this is possibly a slightly old version that's been attached to the report, but it was in there as a pro forma for services to work on in terms of reflecting their own service. But I will amend that for the next report so that it makes that clear and we remove the triple X's, because it is confusing. Apologies for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'll bring in Tony Gaskin at this point, whose hand is up, if he's got a comment to make.
Thanks, Chair. It's just coming back to I suppose an earlier comment when we talked about the primary care risk and that having sat at 25 for some time. I looked ahead to the risk register, and without spoiling the excitement of that, I can't see a target risk set out. But as ever, I mean, I think these reports are really powerful. They're very comprehensive and they're very clear. What I'm not getting, and that's not a criticism of the report, it's just something I think that perhaps would be helpful, would be an understanding of what we're aiming for with this. Because clearly we're not going to be getting into any sunny uplands anytime soon. It's going to be difficult for some time, but how far do we think we can mitigate this risk? And in a sense, I know we've got another manager coming and we're trying things, but a lot of these things feel similar to things we've tried before without it really hitting the score. So I suppose that thing about recalibrating and being realistic, what's the best we can achieve in this situation so that we've got a realistic target, and this committee and other parts of the system involved in the process understand what's the best we can do and how we know we're getting there.
Thanks, Tony. Absolutely. I mean, I think that the talk that we had at the Care Governance Committee workshop that you gave, which was talking about the recalibration of the risks, really hit home with us in the Dundee Partnership. And I feel that is a piece of work to do, because you're right, those risks have been high for some quite considerable time. And some of them might be ones that we live with and need to recalibrate. Some we're hopeful that when we can get the comprehensive team in place, that we will see movement in those, and we are in some ways moving towards that. But yeah, absolutely, we have got work that we will be looking at to try and address that.
Can I have Sam followed by, last but not least, Dorothy?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Matthew, for a very detailed report. I just refer to page 57, and you talk about the governance huddle, a weekly governance huddle. This is just a question, whether is it appropriate as a new boy, could I attend a governance huddle or not as part of my own personal development, or is that not acceptable?
That's entirely acceptable. We'd be delighted to have you come across. I chair that, Sam. So absolutely. Would you like me to contact you with the dates of that, and then Please. You can come along? Yep, no problem at all.
Sam, Thanks, it's not a cuddle, it's a huddle.
I was hoping it was a cuddle.
The only huddle I've heard of is the Celtic huddle, but that's not my team, so I won't be joining that one. No.
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, Dorothy's smiling away there. She's our last contributor on this item.
Yeah, I'm up for a cuddle as well. Can I come? Thank you, Matthew. Good, clear report, as usual. It's reassuring to see generally showing slow and steady improvement in a lot of areas. That's good. And I'm going to ask, I'm not going to call myself a daft lassie, but the new member question at page 45 under 5 A1, the criteria for, you know, who says what is the most important risk? How is that determined?
So in terms of these risks that we've got within here, these are the scores with the current scores at the highest level within the partnership. So they're scored on a grid of 25. So for the top 5, we've got the top 5 scored risks. I think it might be useful perhaps in the next report if we include perhaps a more broad overview of all of the other risks as well, so that perhaps members have got an understanding of some of the other risks that are there, so that we can sort of share the broader risks that are there. But it's all just based on the risk assessment score around the likelihood of the risk occurring and the impact and consequence of the risk. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think so. I'll conjure that a wee bit more. I've got another question.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Sorry, I put my mic off. I've got another question from page 59 on the implementation plan. RAG status, is that how you say it, RAG?
Yes. It's
colour coded. A number of them are colour coded, amber or red, and then some are not colour coded. Some. What does that mean if it's not colour coded? You know, I've got one amber, number 1's amber, then I've got a few reds, and then 6, 7, 8 and 9 don't seem to have colour coding.
That's a mistake in the printing, Dorothy. I noticed that as well.
Right, okay, so my report is not showing the colour coding for 6, 7, 8 and 9.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that the coding, sorry, this isn't my report, and Dan isn't with us to talk to this. I also think that it might be that the focus at the moment nationally is on standards 1 to 5.
Yeah.
So the RAG status have been applied to 1 to 5.
Yeah.
And while early interim work has started on 6 to 10, they're not yet been provided with the RAG status. So that will come on board when we get to that stage, I think, but I can check that with Diane.
That's useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there are, Tony, is that a legacy hand or you want to come in again? And you're on mute.
Sorry, that was a legacy hand.
Oh, okay, no problem. I think at this point, actually, we should have a 5-minute break just to let people get up and walk around a wee bit. What's the time? 11:16. Come back at 11:22, please. That's 6 minutes. Thank you. So that is 11:22 now. If we could move on to the next item. Well, by the way, Arlene, I noticed you sent me that item that I couldn't find. I appreciate that. I think I always get a bit of a thankful when I don't have a printed copy and I'm chairing a meeting, so I'll probably get a printed copy next time. I just get a bit mixed up with trying to access digital copies quickly, but I appreciate you sending that, but I did find it eventually. Thank you. So yeah, over to you again, Arlene, to move us on.
Yep, so we're now on to item 7, which is the Strategic Risk Register update, and it's for noting.
Okay, Claire's going to take us through this one. I'll come in with a couple of comments as well. So I'll pass over to Claire first. Thanks.
I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yep.
Yep.
So the Strategic Risk Register update, it hasn't changed since the last the extract hasn't changed since the last report. The highest risk, scoring risks remain the same: staff resource, Dundee Drug and Alcohol Recovery Service and the National Care Service. However, 5.4, as noted in the PAC report, the sustainability of primary care on the meeting agenda, there is a number of recommendations and actions relating to the risk management around primary care. So we will be updating that for the next risk register. We've also had a meeting of the clinical care and professional governance meeting where we look specifically at risk and how we ensured that all of the operational team managers had access to this strategic risk register and how we score them and get that information through. So I think maybe that the next risk register you see will kind of look significantly different in terms of the information provided from the extract.
Thanks, Claire. Actually, Claire's covered everything I was going to say as well, so if we can open it up for questions. So thanks, Claire.
Does anyone have any questions? Seems we're getting an awful lot of red today, but yeah, there's lots of amber. There's lots of lesser risks than we had in the last report, isn't there? Annie, yeah.
Given that Sam and Dorothy are new and Dorothy had already asked about who decides what risks, would it be worthwhile, Dave, having a wee refresher session on risk management?
Yes, absolutely. So what we probably should have said was that, I mean, we've had down for a few months a planned session for risk appetite and taking that forward as an IJB. So because there's quite, you'll see in your diary, there's quite a few development sessions being put in. So we've taken the decision to defer this one till probably around about March in terms of the risk appetite. Just because there's so many other ones that are probably kind of more an immediate priority. So when we get that in the diary, we'll kind of make sure we do a refresh on sort of risk management as an introduction before we move on to the risk appetite side of things, because I appreciate it can be quite complex in terms of how it all kind of works through. And I know you'll get, obviously the previous item on the clinical care and professional governance, you get kind of quite a good overview of what's actually happening there. And we'll have the risk register. It would certainly help to kind of get a bit more focused time on risk. So yeah, absolutely, Annie. We'll kind of make sure that's in the diary soon.
Good idea, Dorothy.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that, Dave, because I want to get my head around risk, and I have found it quite complicated. And I wondered, the only comment I had to make about this report was that there's no change since the last report, but I'm reassured, Claire, by your comments that we'll see some changes in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that is for, again, for noting. So can we move on to the next item, please?
Item 8, Governance Action Plan Progress Report. This is also for noting.
Okay, this one's for me, just to kind of take you through. I'll go through kind of line by line. I probably should have said at the start of the meeting, actually, Chair, that we have with us today our new external auditors, Richard Smith and Mary O'Connor, have joined us. They've just started the kind of the audit as being our auditors from Audit Scotland, and I'll let them introduce themselves first. But this document will be kind of one of the key things that they'll be looking at come the year end when doing the external report, as will Tony's team in terms of the internal audit. So Mary and Richard, sorry, I should have kind of said to you before. Do you want to kind of do the introduction?
Yeah, welcome. You want to speak?
Richard, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first, Dave. Yeah, so just to introduce myself, so I'm Richard Smith. So I was previously the Senior Audit Manager for Dundee City Council and also HST side, so I know quite a lot of what's going on, obviously, at the IGB, and I worked closely with Anne-Marie and Fiona previously. But then, as part of the audit rotation, I've now taken over the audit of Dundee City IGB, so obviously we're working closely with Dave and Vicky on that. I'll hand over to Mary to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everybody, Mary O'Connor. I'm the Senior Auditor. I'll be working with Dundee City IGB. I've previously worked on Angus IGB, and I've also done some work with with Orkney IGB and East Lothian IGB, so I've got a bit of an oversight across a few. So looking forward to working with you all.
Yep.
Okay, thanks both, and obviously it's good to have people with good kind of background knowledge of and working of IGBs as well, because I'm sure, as you would expect, it's a complicated area in terms of governance and the accounts and things like that as well. So so it's good to have you on board. So so in terms of the governance, the update report itself, as you can see, we've still got quite a range of actions. Again, kind of similar to the action tracker, we've got quite a few that go back a wee bit. And our aim is obviously to kind of try and clear up as many of these as possible over the coming months. The report itself kind of shows you the progress this is kind of taken from the Pentana reporting. So it is a kind of an automatic report. Officers are going to update on prompt, so it's kind of pretty up to date and sort of kind of live document in terms of that side of things. So there's a few things that we've made some good progress on. What you don't see is all the list of kind of things that are 100% finished. So we only kind of show the ones that are still outstanding on the governance action plan. Otherwise, the list would be kind of quite even more pages long. So, but you'll see there's a number of areas as well where we need to kind of make some kind of progress on. Some of them were kind of linked in with the revision of the integration scheme. Now that's all been kind of cleared and we reported back in December. So there's quite a few things we can probably start to kind of move on and take off as being complete once we report them to you, and then they'll be presented at the May PAC as being kind of completed. So so I don't know if there's any particular questions that anybody has on this one, but it's a really good monitoring tool for us so we don't lose sight of the actions that have come from either audit recommendations, that might be internal or external, and various audit reports in particular, and other actions that we've agreed at the IGB. Councillor McHugh.
I like the layout of this report, Dave, and I particularly like the last column, which has the latest update. I think that's very useful. I'm not sure that there's a column headed dates due date and a column headed dates original due date. I find that a bit confusing. Could you explain that to me, please?
Yeah, so it's what's kind of recorded on the system. So we would have an original date that we would have entered to say this is when we're going to complete it. And then Pentana itself kind of allows you, if you're going to kind of if you're not going to meet that date, it's going to put an alternative date in. Now, just when you say that, I'm looking at some of them, they're still kind of October 2022 and things like that as well. So we need to kind of go in and revise them. So in effect, if you've got your original date that was due, and then where we think it's going to be ready the next time. So, but just look at that, I think there's a couple need to be updated that haven't been. So, I'll pick that up. Thank you.
This is just a software package then, is it? Obviously Pentana, yeah.
Yeah, so it's the council's performance and risk management systems. This is the risk management system that we use, and it's kind of really helpful. So this is not the risk management. So there's the risk management element that kind of Claire uses to generate the risk report. And this one is the kind of the wider governance actions that are there. So very, it's the same package, but really useful in terms of what we get out of it.
Okay, thanks for that. So it's for noting, unless there are any more questions. I don't think so. We move on to the next item, please, Arlene.
Item 9 is the internal audit plan progress report, and it's for noting.
Okay, I think that Tony came back on the call. Tony, I don't know if you want to kind of lead off on this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a fantastic amount of difference since last time, so we're on track. The one audit's taken a wee bit longer to finalise than expected, and we're currently talking to Dave about that one. But we've got to make sure that the information's correct, and we're just diving a little deeper into that to make sure that it's accurate. But we're still on track to deliver the assurance you need by year end, and you can see from the report where we are on each audit. And really, I'll just open it up to any questions you might have.
Glad that we're on track anyway. Anyone else have a question? No, I think that's just for noting. So thank you for that, Tony.
Yeah.
Was that the final item other than?
Yeah, because item 10's been dealt with, and item 11 is the attendance list, which is for information and record purposes.
And do we have the date and time of next meeting as well at the end?
Yes, we do. It's Wednesday, the 24th of May at 10 o'clock.
Oh yeah, of course. This only meets 4 times a year, doesn't it? It's not like the IJB. Okay. Well, thanks for your attendance today, everyone, and see you soon. Bye.
Thanks. See you later.